in the insurance policy life cycle and legal implications, presented by Saul Ewing. Today, my colleagues and I will discuss the many implications of employing AI technology within the insurance policy life cycle, including underwriting, pricing, and claims adjudication, with the goal of helping you navigate these uncharted legal waters. My name is Fred Garson, and I am a partner and co-chair of Saul Ewing's Insurance Industry Group. I'm joined today by two guest speakers who have hands-on industry knowledge. Eli Orado Nieves is the head of strategic public policy and assistant general counsel at Guardian Life and is based out of New York. Scott Fisher is the head of government relations and general counsel for Lemonade Insurance Company and is also based out of New York. I'm also joined by my esteemed colleagues from Saul Ewing. Kara Pike is a partner in Saul Ewing's Insurance Industry Group, and she's based in our Harrisburg office. She is going to co-moderate this panel discussion with me. Matt Cole is a partner in Saul Ewing's litigation group, and he oversees the firm's AI working group and is based out of our Baltimore office. Bill Latza is counsel in Saul Ewing's Insurance Industry Group, and he works out of our New York office. Interestingly, Bill was the former general counsel for Lemonade Insurance Company. And last but not least, Kira Smirkanich is a partner in the firm's Insurance Industry Group and in our litigation department, and she is based out of our Washington, D.C. office. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping announcements. The first is concerning questions and answers. Questions can be submitted through the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. While we will do our best to answer all questions submitted during the webinar, should we run out of time, we will follow up individually with emails. As you know, this program is eligible for one distance learning substantive CLE credit in a number of states. In order to verify your participation and receive your certificate of attendance, you'll need to complete a brief continuing legal education verification survey and note the numeric codes provided during today's webinar. These codes are part of our requirement and will be announced verbally. The verification survey link was included in your reminder email and will also open automatically in your browser at the conclusion of the webinar. Please be sure to complete the survey by Wednesday, February 26th. In the next few days, you will also receive a follow-up email that will include links to the webinar recording, supplemental presentation materials, and CLE information. And last but not least, our legal disclaimer: the provision and receipt of the information in this program is not legal advice, does not create a lawyer-client relationship, and should not be acted on without seeking professional counsel who have been informed of the specific facts. And with that, let's begin. Kara, take it away.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to start with our first question. This question will go to Bill, Matt, and Scott. What questions or issues should insurance company lawyers and business representatives be concerned about with respect to the use of AI in the insurance policy lifecycle? Some companies seem to not know where to begin and what questions to ask regarding AI. So I'm going to start this off with Bill, if you could share your thoughts.
Bill, you're on mute.
You would think after the pandemic, I would remember that. I think there's like one really fundamental question that needs to be asked before embarking on the implementation journey. And that's why do you want to implement? And that will then lead you, I think, then to other questions. So what kind of AI am I looking to implement? What am I hoping to achieve with it? What are my business objectives? It all goes back to, I think, what is it that I want to achieve? And if all you want to achieve is keeping up with the Joneses because AI is a hot thing, that's probably not a good idea. But if you want to think about, expediting processes, saving costs, coming up with better ways of doing things, more accuracy, better customer experience. If you have a clear idea of what you want to do, that will lead you, I think, to other questions. And of course, we're only lawyers, so we should always ask our business people. So.
Thanks, Bill. Scott, what are your thoughts on this question?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, so I'm at a company that is very tech focused and always has been and always will be. So I think the kind of an answer, little kind of a fake answer, but nonetheless is if you're not using it, why aren't you using it? And I take Bill's point, you just don't want to just keep up with the Joneses, but there's so much opportunity. There's so many ways in which it can be helpful. And quite frankly, it's not going anywhere. Maybe it's more hype than it should be, but it's certainly here. It's here to stay. So I think I completely agree with everything that Bill said. I think I would focus, being the lawyer at this tech insurance company, I think I would focus a little bit. If you are a lawyer, if you're working with these companies, I think the question is, you're going to use it. So the question really is, how are you going to use it? Which really certainly dovetails with what Bill said. What are you going to do with it? And frankly, what it becomes is a question of what are the use cases that you're going to make for it? Where are you going to put it? Are you going to put it in, or are you striving to use it in claims? Are you striving to use it in pricing? Striving to use it in underwriting? Just trying to use it in internal processes. And the answers to those questions will probably drive your analysis, your legal analysis, as to what is it that you need to be concerned about. Because quite frankly, to ask the question, well, what are the AI laws? And the answer is there aren't any. There are guidances, there are statements, there are some, minor regulations, but what there really are is there are laws of general application. And so the question is when you're looking at, you're going to use AI, where are you going to use it? What are the laws of general application that apply to that area? So if it's claims, for example, air claims practices, okay, we got that. Or licensing, for example, we got that. How does what you're doing, what you're proposing to do, fit within those laws of general application, if at all? If not, you got probably a big problem. If it more likely than not, it fits within it in some way, and where are the frictions? Where are the rubs? Where are the things that you might want to do something utilizing AI that's a little hard to square with the laws of general application? But that's the as far as our jobs as lawyers is kind of trying to square that round peg, or put whatever it is, whatever the metaphor is, trying to come up with the ways in which to make what you're planning on doing fit within the rules as they exist as best as possible.
Thank you, Scott. Matt, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a few points. I think Bill and Scott touched on these questions, but I would frame them as, what can we use AI for, and how should we use AI, right? And so that first question really entails, what are the use cases that we think would help our business reach our objectives? And then the second question is, well, we've identified these use cases. Is there any legal or ethical rule prohibiting us from using the information in this way with this new technology that presents a lot of unique risks that other software systems don't? And then an important question I think to ask as lawyers is, at some level, do I understand the technology, right? Because if you're working with your procurement team to license a system, an LLM, or some other developed technology from a third party, or if you're working with your own product development team to develop an internal system, or some combination of the two, as lawyers, you really need to understand and ask really important questions about that get to the heart of the technology. Is there someone else's IP involved, and what is that IP, and who owns it, and what are the rights? Is there PII or PHI involved, and has it been anonymized? And then what are the risks around the output, who owns the output, et cetera? And once you start thinking about those questions, it'll lead down the governance path to, doing your due diligence on the vendor, on the technology, and then implementing all the right checks and balances once it's been implemented to make sure that things are being monitored. And if there's troubleshooting or something goes awry, you know how to address it on the back end.
If I could just build on something that both of my colleagues have said here. This is a rapidly evolving area of the law. And often you're as lawyers, you're going to be faced with questions to which there is no definitive answer. And in those circumstances, I always like to fall back on first principles. And so what we have done is attach the NAIC's principles for AI in the handout material that you're going to be getting. I recommend you read it and really try to internalize that, because at the end of the day, it goes a long way to say, look, we really tried to do the right thing. And what we did was consistent with this principle. Yeah, maybe we didn't get it right, but our heart was in the right place. So I think that's important.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I'm going to ask the next question. What are some of the key legislative proposals in the US and internationally that could impact the use of AI in insurance? Ellie, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. And as I kick off, my own personal disclaimer is that my comments are based on my personal experience in AI governance and as well as legislative and regulatory trends, and nothing that I share should be interpreted as representing my company's policies, practices, or any official positions on these topics. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this discussion. So just to be responsive to your question, as AI continues to play an increasingly significant role in the insurance industry, regulators around the world are implementing measures to ensure that it's being used responsibly. So several key legislative and regulatory actions are shaping the landscape and requiring insurers to remain vigilant as well as proactive, to Bill's point, in their compliance efforts. On the international front, the EU AI Act has officially come into force in early February 2025, meaning that it's been in effect for just a little over 2 weeks now. And the Act classifies AI applications based on risk levels. So for our intents and purposes, insurance underwriting and claims processing falls within the high risk AI systems category. So anything that falls within the high risk category is subject to strict regulatory requirements. And that includes risk assessments and documentation to ensure that there's transparency, bias mitigation measures to prevent discrimination, human oversight, and explainability requirements. So insurers that operate in the EU have to take immediate steps at this point to ensure that they're complying with these new requirements. In the US, there have been some state-level industry-driven initiatives specifically impacting the insurance sector. New York has taken a very active role in AI governance within the insurance industry. Two key regulatory measures from New York come from the New York Department of Financial Services, and they've already put standards together for the use of AI in underwriting and other insurance operations. So we have Circular Letter 1 of 2019, and this circular letter focuses on guidance with regard to the use of external consumer data and information sources, or how we like to refer to it for short as ECDIS. And any algorithms in underwriting. And it requires insurers to make sure that AI-driven models don't result in unfair discrimination, and that any decisions that they make are transparent in terms of their processes. So insurers have to also demonstrate that their AI tools comply with anti-discrimination laws and that they already have adequate oversight mechanisms in place. And most recently, the New York DFS put forward Circular Letter 7 of 2024, which builds on the 2019 guidance. And what they do is they expand the requirements for AI governance and fairness testing. So it emphasizes a need for continuous monitoring and testing for disparate impact, as well as stronger governance structures to ensure that AI models remain compliant. The state of Colorado has also taken some significant steps to regulate AI in insurance. They passed a law, Senate Bill 169, that requires the insurance commissioner to issue regulations that ensure that algorithms and predictive models that are used in insurance underwriting and pricing don't result in unfair bias. And right now, the insurance commissioner is in the process of creating rules within a public forum to make sure that they can implement this particular law. And, so that's something that you should keep an eye on if this is something of interest to you and you do business in Colorado. And then lastly, I'll just mention that the National Association of Insurance Commissioners has developed an AI governance model, which has now been adopted in 23 states. New Jersey is the latest to adopt the model. And the model really provides a uniform framework for AI regulation and insurance. And it requires insurers to implement governance policies that document how AI systems are used, also to have risk assessments and impact analyses to determine whether there's any potential for unfair practices and discrimination. So this is really the direction that we're seeing a lot of the regulations and laws taking. And as more states adopt the NAIC model, we're going to see that is becoming quickly the standard for insurance companies with regard to regulation.
And Ellie, if I could just chime in with one additional piece of legislation, this one from the West Coast, going a little bit further from California, that also affecting the use of AI. This one is particular to health and disability insurers. It is the Physicians Make Decisions Act. And just by way of background, I'm a coverage attorney. And so part of why I've been kind of interested in looking into AI is the questions that we're getting from clients about the potential for a bad faith claim resulting from the use of AI, particularly in the adjustment investigation process. And so there's quite a bit of litigation that has come out on this subject, and it's been in the health insurance field and the use of various algorithms and AI tools to make decisions in terms of, how much care a patient needs. And so what seems to be a response directly to some of these lawsuits, one of which is actually in the California federal courts, California passed the Physicians Make Decisions Act, and it does provide, it recognizes, right, that AI is going to be used in this context, but does provide some restrictions. It hits on a lot of the same things that you were discussing, the need for transparency, making it publicly available or available upon request to explanations of the AI and how it's used. But it puts restrictions on decisions, again, claims within the health insurance space specifically, so that AI cannot replace a doctor or physician or healthcare professional decision-making. And interestingly enough, that you have to use individualized factors as well. You cannot simply look at group data as part of the AI model when you're making these decisions. So it's a bit specific, and it's obviously coming out of California only. But what's been interesting is sort of, given that these litigations aren't just in California, they're in other federal courts, Kentucky, Minnesota, are these going to be a kind of a blueprint that other states may want to adopt? And, dare I open up the complete debate as to whether there'll be any type of federal regulation on this or similar AI tools?
Okay. Thank you very much, Ellie and Kira. Our next question is sort of a basic fundamental question. What stages of the insurance policy life cycle are regulated concerning AI, and how are they regulated? And I guess we're talking about everything from marketing through underwriting and pricing and even including claims. So Scott, you want to take this one?
Sure. And I should add the same disclaimer that Ellie did, although I don't know that I'm going to say anything that I wouldn't say on behalf of Lemonade in any event, but I'll add the disclaimer just in case. So I think, Fred, the answer, again, it's kind of they're all regulated, but they're not all AI regulated, meaning, there are very few regulations, or take it back. There are lots of regulations of general application that apply to every factor or every stage of the insurance life cycle, from advertising, procure or production to the policy languages, and all of that stuff, particularly in the area that Lemonade is in, which is basically consumer insurance. As I'm sure most of the people listening understand, there's less regulation when you get more commercial. Pricing is not as heavily or not subject to the prior approval in life the way that it is for auto insurance, those things. So all of those things are already governed. There's nothing, or there's very little, with the exception talk about in a second, or Ellie already mentioned it, Colorado, and DFS it's chimed in on pricing, but by and large, there's no AI regulation to speak of. There are lots of regulations that apply generally. So the question is, how do you fit what you're doing with AI into the existing structure? And I think the AI model is a good example of what that does, or sought to do, and I think actually probably does, is it says, and it was very conscientious to not make new rules or regulations or new law. It says, well, the regulations of general applications, here's how we're going to apply them to AI. And so I think the answer to your question is that they're all regulated, particularly if you're in a retail space like health, or a retail space like the Lemonade is in. It's just a question of how is the use of AI going to be interpreted or assessed or governed or enforced against in connection with what the existing laws are. So I think, the answer is, when you're out there working on working to utilize AI in your insurance lifecycle, again, it's figuring out the ways in which the existing laws, whatever they are going to apply to that particular use case. Just having said that, I mean, I think, just to pause a second on Colorado and DFS. I mean, Colorado and DFS are two of a kind in that they are actually trying to make specific rules, or, I mean, DFS would say it's guidance, but whatever, specific rules about what you can do in terms of underwriting and pricing. And then Colorado, even though I think the law isn't unique to pricing and underwriting. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's not specifically unique to that, but it ends up, that's where the regulations have been going, which in pricing and underwriting. And so I think in that respect, there's a little bit more emphasis, for good reason, on those areas. And in those areas, again, it's rules they're for New York, trying to apply rules of general applicability. Colorado has a special rule for this, so that's probably the only place where you see it. So I think the answer is that it implies in all parts of the life cycle that themselves are regulated. And the trick really is, to go back to what Bill said earlier, is to figure out a way in which, if the regulators or a plaintiff's attorney were to come knocking, you could point to, well, here's what I was required to do. Here's what I would do in the non-AI world, and here's what I did when I applied AI into that problem. And here's the best effort that I made in order to ensure that something that was written, back when certified mail was the quickest and most effective way to send out a notice, that this is how I'm addressing it.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. Kara's going to take over for the next couple of questions.
And an exciting pause for the first CLE code. It is 71241. That is 71241. And I think a little bubble is going to pop up that also displays it for you guys to get down. Okay. So for this next question, this is to Ellie. And I know you mentioned before that in the AI model bulletin, there is discussion of governance. So what are some key AI governance challenges that insurers face as they integrate AI into their operations?
Sure. So one of the most pressing issues is the regulatory uncertainty. So I'm going to echo Scott a little bit here. But with some of the federal and state level AI regulatory activity rapidly evolving, insurers have to be proactive to monitor their own self-compliance and self-regulation so that they can maintain operational flexibility at this point. The absence of a unified framework means that insurers have to navigate a patchwork of laws and regulatory expectations. And that really makes AI governance very complex on an increasingly level. So another critical challenge is some of what we're hearing out of Colorado and New York and the NAIC, which is monitoring for bias and fairness in AI decision making. You know, AI models used in underwriting, pricing, and claims processing must be free of discriminatory biases to comply with anti-discrimination laws and also industry fairness principles. So any failure to mitigate bias not only increases regulatory risk, but it also it undermines consumer confidence in companies that are using these AI-driven processes. I think another challenge is explainability and transparency. Bill mentions the NAIC AI principles, which I think is a great baseline and starting point for companies that are looking to start instituting AI governance. But when we start talking about operationalizing those principles, I find that explainability and transparency is where most companies have some challenges. You really need to sit down with your AI governance group. If you don't have one, create one and really ask yourselves, what does it mean when you have an AI system in place that, you know, how do you actually operationalize explainability and transparency? Because otherwise you're going to be encountering many hurdles on the regulatory front. A lot of decisions that are made by AI are made by these complex machine learning models, and it makes it very difficult to provide clear, interpretable justifications to regulators. So that's, I think, one very important aspect of making sure that we can defend our use of AI if we are utilizing it as a company. And this is something that the industry has been working very diligently on. So something that, like I said, we must always consider how we're operationalizing these particular principles to make sure that we're instituting AI in a very responsible manner.
Thank you, Ellie. Matt, did you want to jump in here?
Sure. I'll just add a few points. You know, we've been talking a lot about the AI specific laws and regulations, but I think it's really important to keep in mind already existing legal frameworks that apply or could apply. Like, so specifically last April, the Massachusetts State Attorney General issued an advisory saying, you know what, we don't need an AI specific law because we're going to enforce consumer protection laws under existing statutes. The Texas Attorney General did something in June, very similar. And then last September, the FTC initiated Operation AI Comply, and I think in the first day filed 4 or 5 enforcement actions against companies for AI washing, right? Making false claims to the public and customers about their AI tools, their AI capabilities, what they can accomplish, and how they can help. So I think it's, you know, it's important to not lose that, you know, in the mix of what are the new AI laws being passed, because the authorities are already saying and filing actions. And you know, the DOJ last June filed a criminal complaint in the Southern District of New York, right, for false claims in an investment prospectus about a company's use of AI. So there's that in the background. So we just can't, you know, we have to understand what's evolving, but also be mindful of our existing obligations under, you know, various statutes. I think, you know, another point of AI challenges is resources, right? Not every company is large enough to have the benefit of data scientists or information technology specialists. And so when you're really figuring out, you know, what are the right use cases and how do we handle this and who should be part of our AI working group or our committee or our committees, right? Companies may have multiple committees. You've really got to make sure you've got all the right subject matter experts at the table to address each of those pieces. And it's not just legal or privacy, but it should also involve HR, sales and marketing, right? Finance. And if you're lucky enough to have product development and data science people, right, they should be involved there as well. And I think another challenge is post-implementation monitoring, right? So there's, you know, a lot of the new laws, like the New York requires a bias audit at the outset and every year. Colorado's AI Act requires an impact assessment, which is annually, which is something a little different. California is kicking around a law that's going to require impact assessments. My perspective, impact assessments are best practice whenever you're implementing an AI tool. But where I'm going with this is, once an AI tool is been deployed, you want to make sure you have somebody who is monitoring it that has the right knowledge and ability to deal with a situation or identify a situation when the model doesn't start working as planned or as originally as intended. There's a concept known as model drift, right, where the output changes over time, and where you may have tested it 8 months ago, you had minimal bias, right, at a statistically acceptable level, but over time things have changed. So I think, making sure you have the right people engaged at all parts of the AI lifecycle is really important. Having all those team members might be a challenge depending on the size and resources of your organization.
Great points. Thank you, Matt, for adding that. Okay, next question. I'm going to start with Bill for this one. What are the greatest benefits of AI and the greatest problems of AI in the insurance policy life cycle?
I think Scott is going to have some like real practical things to say about that because he's still in house. I'm not. But if I can sort of like take a high level view of all of this, one of the great promises of AI, I think, is that it can actually eliminate bias. And there's been a lot of scholarly work done, Daniel Kahneman, Tversky, people like that, who look at cognitive psychology and point out that humans use heuristics, we call them shortcuts, right, to make decisions under cases of uncertainty all the time. And what AI seems to me doing is to actually try to make data-driven decisions. And I know there's a lot there to unpack, not least of which is who is designing the AI, right? Those are humans. But theoretically, at least, AI can make a decision untrammeled by human biases. If the data is right, if the algorithms are right, a lot of ifs, but we're on the way. We're not there yet, but we're on the way. So I think that's one of the potential benefits. There is a flip side to that, and I have to actually read this. Microsoft Research has published a paper called "The Impact of Generative AI on Critical Thinking, Self-Reported Reductions in Cognitive Effort and Confidence Effects from a Survey of Knowledge Workers." Right. And what they found was that AI, and they take the view that AI is just one more in a millennium-long discussion about whether new technologies compromise human endeavors. And we're all horribly familiar with the Socratic method, but Socrates thought that writing actually diminished human thought. So it goes back a long way. And there's a lot of reliance on humans in the loop when AI is talked about. But the Microsoft study, and it's only a survey. I mean, it's not, it is what it is, but it's interesting reading. It suggests that humans in the loop can actually begin to their ability to critically think begins to atrophy. And by relying on AI so much for advice, they lose, if you will, the muscle that helps them to recognize like the more common things, right? So that if they're there to fix an exception, they may not be able to do it because that muscle has atrophied because of AI. interesting thought, I think. So I think that that is a downside. The other thing I would say is that directors and officers liability insurers have started actually to look at the directors and particularly board of director responsibilities for corporate governance for AI. And there is, I forget the name of the organization, but there is like a National Association of Corporate Directors or something, which has done some writing on what directors have to do, because directors, as I think has become clear from Matt's comments, are not they're not data scientists, right? They're it's difficult for them to fulfill their duties, and D&O insurers are beginning to look at that. So I'll let Scott get specific.
Sure, I will try to. I think so, Kara, the question about where's the greatest benefit, I think practically speaking, real world actually here today with us, I'd say is cost. That it drives down cost, right? It just the ability to have, and that's, it's not certainly not unique to AI. I mean, as things got more automated, as a personal computer, I mean, over time things have gotten cheaper because we are getting, or processes get more automated. There's more tools. There's a great improvement in productivity. All these sorts of things, and AI is yet another element of that. There's a lot of things that can be done using technology, using this technology, that have been able to drive down cost. And I think that that's a real world thing that is happening today and will continue to happen in the future. One of the things that it currently, I think, is probably doing is that it makes, and it's, I guess you kind of depend how you want to define exactly artificial intelligence or how you want to define models, but it makes things, it can make things faster. It can make things faster because, you know, you can have faster claim payment. You don't need even something as simple as a reimbursement for, you know, again, for in our little area in pet insurance, you know, the AI can, whether it's just not just, but, you know, OCR'd invoices, you can extract the information. The AI can much more easily identify the cost, the invoice, the coverage, blah, 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 and can make a payment a lot faster and easier and cheaper, because you're probably using less, you're certainly using less human interaction, which another topic. But I think you can, there are more routine, mechanical, ministerial aspects that can be done much more quickly and much more cheaply. So I think those are positives that exist here already. To Bill's point, in the future, and this is a little bit dependent on how comfortable people get with it, it can, I don't think it's hard to say, can certainly have a positive impact on pricing, right? And by positive impact on pricing, I guess what I don't mean that it will make it cheaper necessarily for everybody. It might make it more expensive for other people, but it's not going to be based, it's going to be based on their modicum of risk, how risky they are, how much more likely they are to file claims, those sorts of things. So it would be more appropriate pricing. I don't know if it's cheaper, but it's more appropriate to your risk. Some people will love that. I mean, I think clearly a very, you know, a very dumbed down version is just usage-based insurance for cars. You don't drive as much, you should pay less. It's not going to cost some people a lot less, but that's a real benefit. That's a pretty dumb version of tech. A higher version would be telematics, and now you're going to get better pricing for people who are safer drivers or driving more safely or not driving at night, and you can get better pricing by using more and more technology. On the negative side, I don't really know what the negative is at this moment. I think the negative may be, you know, less people can get hired, but there's not a whole lot that I think is really been shown to be negative. I mean, I guess you could, in Kira's world, there would probably not be a lot of people that would argue that the use of AI or machine learning on the utilization review in a health insurance context would be a real negative. I can certainly see the point. I wouldn't take any position, but I can certainly see the issue. For the bulk of insurance, I'm not sure there's a tremendous amount of negativity there, only because we're pretty well hamstrung in what we can do and what we can't do. Meaning, as I've said before, and as Matt alluded to, right, we're still living in the world we were living in yesterday. The laws are still the laws that they were yesterday, and I still have to go and get my prior approval on my pricing. And frankly, and again, not really controversial, but if states are not super excited to allow for or engage in discussions about the use of AI based modeling, it took them a while, I guess, to get comfortable with generalized linear models, and they're taking a long time to get comfortable with this. So I don't know what the downside is in this, and I frankly think, to Bill's point, there is I don't know if it's a lot of it, but the assumption is that humans are more free from bias, I think, is a demonstrably false. I think that one of the fun things was that, when it comes to Gen AI, they did a test in some hospital and had literally Gen AI and human oncologists giving bad news, and the Gen AI won out because they were more sensitive than the human oncologists. So, I don't really know I think the greatest problems, I don't think the greatest problems that people are fearing have not come to fruition. I don't know if they ever will. I don't think they ever will, but we're sort of we're doing baby steps with AI because of a real resistance to it. But the positives are in existence today, and I think if given a little bit more adoption, we would see a lot more positives to the insurance industry come to light or actually happen.
And Scott, Bill, if I could jump in, I think one of the risks is, you were talking about, I think when Bill said it's the if the data's right. I think there is one of the concerns is when it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you are relying on data for your AI model, for your algorithm that is incorporating data that is biased, that's going to be the results you see. And so, Scott, to your point about what it's going to do in terms of hiring, at least I'll tell you this: the bad faith litigation that's been going on is trying to say you can't completely write out the human element, because there has to be some level of oversight. You can't just completely delegate. You do need to make sure that what is being incorporated is fair, is in compliant with existing laws, because that is going to necessarily affect the outcome.
And I think that's completely true and completely what the expectation is, and there's a role for it. The difficulty with that is the comparison, the dichotomy is utterly false. The notion that because I have a human that goes out and is supposed to inspect the roof of someone's house, that I'm going to somehow get a better result than if it's done by a drone and done by AI looking at pictures of the drone, I think is a false assumption. I think it's demonstrative. I think the other part of the concern about unfair discrimination, right, is again demonstrably false. If you take any of the allegations that Maryland made against the Erie company, and I'm just saying take those allegations as true, the human was at the center of that world, and the whole argument in that case is that those humans were not just biased, but intentionally made to be biased to get the benefit of, to get a financial benefit. So I think you're absolutely right, Kira. I just think that that's probably the thing that is the most frustrating for for me and for a company like Lemonade is to say, like, we think that there's a lot of issues here. There are a lot of difficulties, but to compare it to human interaction, probably not the best comparison.
Well, yeah, I think the underlying assumption of having a human in the loop is that the human in the loop has good intentions, right? It's not doesn't have its own agenda, right? He's trying to get to the right answer, and that's not always true. In fact, it's often not true. And just so it doesn't get lost in the conversation, insurance is kind of unusual, I think, because it's all about discrimination, right? And there's fair discrimination and there's unfair discrimination. And even the NAIC, if those of you who are around the NAIC a lot, remember when the actuaries, Society of Actuaries, tried to change the definition of what's not inadequate, excessive, or unfairly discriminatory. And the NAIC was up in arms because that standard of practice has been written into law for so long, and so much of insurance regulation is around it. And that standard is that the price of insurance should be an adequate reflection of the expected loss under the policy. And that's by its very nature discriminatory, but it's fairly discriminatory, as opposed to, I'm not going to insure green people, right? So
we actually had a question from the audience related to Scott's prior comments. They mentioned that they think Scott's thoughts are likely true, but does that help all of us within today's regulatory environment? How does that help us within today's regulatory environment?
I would love it if the things that I said were true had an impact on today's regulatory environment. That might I guarantee it would make Ellie and my life easier. Actually might not be great for, Saul Ewing, but I think you're right. It is there. I think the only way, the only practical practical application would be to say that we are all part of the policy life cycle. We are all part of this environment. We are all practitioners in this area. And the more and more that we come, I mean, the regulators, the NAIC certainly do. It doesn't feel like it all the time, but slowly, they do listen to different voices. They do listen to industry. They do listen to where we're headed. I mean, they're not going to be immune from the fact that AI is here and it's not going anywhere, and it's just going to get more and more pervasive into our society. And hopefully being able to demonstrate the value, the Bill's article, or the demonstrate that Gen AI does a better job at human interactions than humans do, I think is probably the best at this moment that we could hope for. There is no clear, to me at least, clear practical, way to make the regulatory community appreciate or understand our perspective. They are quite, I wouldn't say rightly, but understandably, suspicious and skeptical. That's fine. I guess our job is to deal with that skepticism and assuage those concerns. So the answer is, you're right. This is very nice thoughts and fun to talk about. As a practical matter, it's a slow process.
Oh, it's very slow, but I think as lawyers, what we have to be sure is that we can advise our clients what is a reasonably defensible position, right? And that requires us, I think, to become a little more numerate than lawyers usually are, and to be able to talk to data scientists and actuaries and tech people, and think about the philosophy really of fairness and unfairness, and just, as I said at the outset, as long as you're trying in good faith to abide by some foundational principles. I think what lawyers have to do is allow their clients to just, in order to do business, have a reasonably defensible position.
Mhm. Thank you, Bill. Fred, why don't we skip the next question and go to Ellie's question, just for time constraint purposes.
Kara and I think exactly alike, because I was going to say the exact same thing. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we've got about 10 questions, but let's see if we can get 2 questions in the next 10 minutes. So this is for Ellie. Very interesting question. How did President Biden's executive order 14110 on AI, which was issued in October of 2023, aim to regulate AI development and deployment? And what were the primary reasons cited by the Trump administration for revoking it in January of 2025?
So the Biden administration was really aiming to put forward a regulatory framework by empowering the federal government agencies to set standards for their area of business or their area of regulation. So it didn't actually regulate financial services firms or insurance industry or insurance companies. It was really aiming to set a framework within the actual federal government. The Trump administration is really seeking to make sure that the United States maintains its competitive edge in the world. And you might have even seen some comments in the news of the vice president at the Paris summit just last week, where he basically asked European nations to stand firm in partnering with the US and not hindering US-based companies with strict EU regulations when it comes to artificial intelligence. Notably, I will say that under the Biden administration, despite the fact that he did issue this executive order and he asked the agencies to come in line with that order, the US has typically taken a light touch. I think because we have seen over the past several years a lot of the debates that occurred in the EU, and to see how they actually landed in the EU AI Act was interesting from afar, but it looked like it was very painful from actually sitting within the European Union. So I think that the US learned from that experience, from observing that experience in the EU, to take a little bit more of a lighter touch and really operate with regard to principles in general. So we'll see what happens now when the Trump administration actually does issue what I believe will continue to be light touch regulations to really foster innovation for the United States within the world order.
Thank you very much, Ellie. The second CLE code is 83652, 83652, and I believe that will be in writing sent to everybody as well. Okay, we'll try to squeeze in a question or 2 more. We're going to shift our focus a little bit now to kind of the claims adjusting side. This is going to be directed to Kira. What risks do insurers face when it comes to using AI for claims adjusting and management?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think I touched on this before with some of the other comments I made earlier. And again, the focus that we're looking on in claims is sort of the concern about how I adjust this claim, how I evaluate this claim, how I investigate this claim. Is that going to open me up to bad faith or any type of other extra contractual duties, penalties? And so really sort of, again, looking at cases that are currently making its way through, they're making their way through the courts. A lot of it is sort of this kind of over reliance on AI, using it to make decisions, taking humans and oversight completely out of the process, just sort of putting it into the system, relying on it to make the system, the AI system, to make a determination as to, what level of scrutiny should this particular property claim get. Should using kind of group data on acute care, using that solely to make a determination on whether or not to approve a particular recommendation that's been made by a physician. So I think kind of synthesizing these cases and sort of answering the question of sort of what is the risks that are faced. It is am I so reliant on AI that I have completely delegated my investigation, my duty to make an investigation, my duty to reasonably adjust this, such that I am putting myself in a position where I and my company could be facing a bad faith claim. Now, I will say, and maybe I'll pick up a little bit on Scott's optimism and bullishness with AI, there is a huge kind of, I think, potential for AI in the claims handling process, right? And you think about, like, we have most all states have claims handling regulations setting forth, the timelines by which you have to make decisions, deadlines by which you have to, reasonably respond to communication. I mean, there is a huge opportunity for AI to help claims adjusters to make sure that they're complying with these statutes, to make sure that they are, have the tools that they can use to reasonably make an investigation that's not going to put them into bad faith territory. But I think the kind of key factor, and again, this is the key factor that I've been able to distill from reviewing these various cases, is it cannot be kind of all or nothing. It cannot just be just the human making the decision or just the AI model making the decision. It's kind of finding that optimization, that how can we use AI to make the claims process more effective, but not just making AI the claims process.
Thank you, Kira. I know you're trying to get it into a short amount of time, so thank you. You did great. I think maybe I can try and squeeze in one more question. There's 4 minutes left, if Ellie is okay with it, because I like this question. How do policymakers differentiate between high risk and low risk AI applications in insurance? And what implications does this have for the industry compliance?
Sure. So policymakers categorize AI applications based on their potential impact on consumers and also on financial risk, which really directly influences the level of regulatory oversight that we're seeing regulators step into. So when we think about high-risk AI applications, we'll see increased regulatory scrutiny. So certain AI applications in insurance are considered high risk because they have direct financial implications and can affect consumers' access to coverage and claims outcomes. So these include underwriting and pricing, any AI models that are used to assess policy eligibility and also determine pricing. They have to comply with fairness and non-discrimination laws to ensure that they don't create biased or unfair outcomes. Claims processing and fraud detection. AI-driven claims processing systems also have to be transparent and auditable to ensure that the decisions that are made are explainable and free from any discriminatory biases. And then also, when we think about algorithmic decision-making, any AI model that influences consumer financial outcomes, such as automated credit risk assessments or policy recommendations, that will also face heightened regulatory scrutiny. So we need to make sure that we are complying with consumer protection standards. And then on the other hand, you have some AI applications that are very low risk, and they don't directly impact the policyholder rights or their financial decisions, like chatbots, virtual assistants, customer service, routine inquiries of that sort, and those pose minimal regulatory risk.
Thank you very much. We have 1 or 2 minutes to spare, so I just wanted to take this time on behalf of the insurance practice at Saul Ewing. We want to thank all of our presenters. You guys did an excellent job today, and the attendees for their participation. Our team just added a survey link to the chat box, but please remember to keep an eye out for the thank you email with program materials and the CLE verification survey, so that you can submit the reporting codes from today's webinar. Also, please feel free to reach out to any of our presenters with questions today. I think we got to all of the ones that were placed in the box, but we really appreciate everybody attending today, and thank you again to our presenters.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
care.
you.
Everyone.